Payments for life for the victims of the contaminated blood scandal. The multi-billion-pound compensation scheme will start at the end of this year, but not everyone is happy about the levels of money being offered.
We find it insulting and I would say disrespectful, but it's more than that, because it's as much it shows as much contempt towards the families, the parents of the children that died and their wider families, as it does us.
There will also be enhanced payments recognising the social impact on some of those affected. Also this lunchtime. Charged in LA, 5 people over the death of Friends star Matthew Perry, including 2 doctors and his assistant. Here, just when you thought they were over, new train strikes just announced. We'll have all the details. How to spend wisely on holiday, the advice on not getting caught out by card charges, and as if Taylor wasn't enough, an extra treat for Swifties at Wembley.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Lucrezia Millarini.
Good afternoon. It's been described as the worst treatment disaster in NHS history. Now, victims of the infected blood scandal will receive financial support for life in an updated multi-billion-pound compensation scheme. Tens of thousands of people were infected with HIV or hepatitis C by contaminated blood products and transfusions between 1970 and 1991. Under the scheme, survivors, as well as bereaved partners, will receive support payments for the rest of their lives starting from the end of the year. Those subjected to unethical research will get up to £15,000 extra. The new framework follows an independent review, but some campaigners say it isn't enough. Here's our political correspondent, Carl Dinham.
After decades of fighting for it, the thousands of people either infected or affected by the infected blood scandal now know that they will at long last be getting their full compensation.
The Infected Blood Compensation Authority is obviously independent of government, but I expect it to be making the first payments to infected people by the end of the year. For affected people, I expect those payments to start in 2025.
Victims will be able to claim compensation for the illness itself, as well as any associated social isolation and stigma. They'll be able to claim for damage to their private lives, for care costs and loss of earnings. It all means that someone with a serious hepatitis infection could claim up to £1.6 million, and someone with an HIV infection could claim up to £2.6 million. Richard Warwick was infected with HIV and hepatitis B and C after being subjected to experimental treatments without his knowledge or consent whilst a pupil at Treloar's special school. Those infected at Treloar's will get an additional £15,000 for the breach of trust. Richard says it's not enough.
The few of us that are still alive, we find it insulting and I would say disrespectful, but it's more than that, because it's as much shows as much contempt towards the families, the parents of the children that died and their wider families, as it does us.
Is £15,000 really enough for such an incredible breach of trust?
No amount of money is going to make up for the loss of a close relative or indeed the suffering people have endured over a lifetime.
But at least now there will be money. Today, the government also said regular support payments would continue, meaning a degree of certainty for victims too. Although, for the more than 3,000 people who've died as a result of this scandal, all of it is just too late.
Campaigners battled for justice over decades, with the government only agreeing to pay compensation in the final weeks of the Conservative administration. Today's announcements prove the broad political support for making things right. Well, let's go to Carl now, who is in Westminster for us this lunchtime. Carl, is this finally the end of the matter?
I think for a large number of the victims, it's close to that. I think a lot of people will be very happy to take their compensation and get on with what remains of their lives. There will be some, I mean, you heard from Richard Warwick in my report, who are not happy with this situation and may choose to fight on, as well as those who've experienced breach of trust. I mean, people may look at this and think, well, there's no recognition of the delay in getting to this point. £1 million at the end of your life has a different effect to £1 million in the middle of your life and what you can do with your life. So some may be considering that. And I think there is also another group that we haven't really talked about very much today, and that is the pharmaceutical companies who made these products in the first place. Should they be footing part of this bill? It will be a big bill. It will run into many billions of pounds, and at the moment it's the taxpayer who is going to pay for it. The government has yet to give its full and final reply to the inquiry. We'll possibly get that later this year, and we'll find out a bit more about that. So although for many of the families it is the beginning of the end, I think in broader terms we're not quite at the end of this yet.
All right, Carl in Westminster, thank you. 5 people have been charged, including 2 doctors, over the death of Friends star Matthew Perry. He was found dead in a hot tub at his Los Angeles home last year. The investigation has now led to suspects appearing in court, accused of contributing to his ketamine overdose. Our reporter Aisha Zahid is here. So Aisha, just talk us through what's happened over the last 24 hours.
Well, authorities have revealed a series of details about the events that led to Matthew Perry's death. To remind you, he was found dead at his Los Angeles home in October, his death attributed to the acute effects of ketamine, and that triggered a police investigation into how he obtained it. It's known that Perry had received ketamine therapy for depression, and authorities say it's during this time where he became addicted and turned to an underground criminal network, who then went on to take advantage of this. Among the 5 people charged, one of them was Jasveen Sangha. She's an alleged drug dealer known as the ketamine queen of LA, and the prosecution have said she operated a drug-selling emporium from her home, and they alleged that she supplied Perry with the vial that ended up killing him. Also charged was Dr. Salvador Plasencia. He allegedly helped Perry get ketamine, and texts were found on his phone where he expressed that he wanted to be Perry's go-to for drugs. Another text to another defendant saying, "I wonder how much this moron will pay." It's alleged Perry was paying $2,000 for vials that cost $12 a piece. Now, of the 5 defendants, Sangha and Plasencia have pleaded not guilty. The other 3 have pleaded guilty, and the trial date has been set for October.
All right, Aisha, thank you. In some other news now, one person is confirmed dead after dozens of Israeli settlers torched a village in the occupied West Bank. Footage has emerged on social media showing houses and vehicles set on fire in the village of Jit late last night. The Israel Defence Force has said some of the settlers wore masks and threw rocks and Molotov cocktails as they attacked the village. The Spanish islands of Mallorca and Menorca have been hit by heavy flooding and fires started by lightning strikes. Firefighters said they rescued 29 passengers from a train line after it was brought to a standstill by floodwaters. And Thailand has elected a new Prime Minister, and it's the country's youngest ever. Paetongtarn Shinawatra is 37 and the daughter of a previous PM who was ousted in 2006. His removal from power had triggered deep political divisions across the country. We'll hear more of those involved in the UK's recent riots and disorder have been up before British courts in the last hour. Roger Hayward from Blackpool has been jailed for 2 years and 6 months. The 41-year-old was convicted last week of violent disorder. He admitted 2 counts of assaulting an emergency worker. Today, a judge described how Hayward encouraged an angry crowd in Blackpool on the 3rd of August.
You chose to turn your back on the police and face the mob. You shouted to them to the effect that the police would not let you through, and then with your arms you beckoned them on to breach the police lines. The crowd moved forward in response, and we hear the shout of missiles as at least one item was thrown at the police. Your aim was clear. You wanted to create a serious, violent and dangerous incident.
Well, next, a fresh wave of rail strikes has been announced, with warnings for passengers planning journeys in the coming months. Train drivers at LNER, which runs services between Edinburgh and London, say they'll walk out over successive weekends. Our reporter Sharon Thomas is outside King's Cross Station for us lunchtime. Sharon, it was only a few days ago there seemed to be a breakthrough in talks with the ASLEF union, and now they've announced new strikes.
Yeah, more strike action on the way, I'm afraid, Lucrezia, and this time it's the drivers who say there's been a total breakdown in industrial relations on LNER. So LNER is a service which operates the main East Coast main line from here in London, King's Cross, up through cities like Leeds, York, Newcastle and up to Edinburgh. So if you do travel on that line, you'll need to know the strike dates. Hundreds of members of the ASLEF union will walk out every Saturday between August the 31st and November the 9th, and every Sunday from September the 1st to November the 10th. That's a total of 22 days. Now, it's really important to note that this is separate from the other dispute over pay. What we've seen over the last 2 years is 18 separate strike dates covering more than a dozen different train companies. But this week, the government has put a new offer on the table. They've offered a 5% pay increase to the union, saying that that's going to be backdated to 2022-23. And ASLEF's 21,000 members, which represents 96% of the train drivers here in the UK, have got to decide whether to take that or not. Just as a quick recap for you, LNER are likely to see services disrupted every weekend from the end of August to the middle of November. So if you are thinking of travelling then, do check before you go, or possibly there may be a resolution somewhere between now and then.
All right, Sharon, at King's Cross in London, thank you. Still ahead on the lunchtime news. The starry duet at Wembley on the first night of Taylor Swift's Eras Tour as it returns to London. But first, are you getting caught out by debit or credit card fees while on holiday? Well, research shared with ITV News reveals the sometimes hidden cost of cash withdrawals. In Spain, for instance, an extra charge of between 50 cents and €6 could be added when taking money out, and that is more than £5. In Greece, charges can be between €2 and €4, and up to €5 for holidaymakers using their cards in Italy. But in France, banks don't add on fees, though watch out, though, for those private ATMs. And joining me now is Harry Kind from the Consumer Group, which, Harry, thanks so much for coming in to talk to us about this. A lot of people either are on holiday or are just about to go, hopefully soon. For a start, let's talk about cash, because I would assume that a lot of places you can just tap your card in and out, but you're saying some countries actually you need to have cash.
You do, and it is amazing the differences country by country. Neighbours, which some really rely on cash. For example, Germany really likes you to have cash, particularly in an outdoor venue, whereas you can go across Scandinavia, Eastern Europe. I travelled on train all the way to Turkey and back, didn't take out any cash for that whole period because you can rely quite well now on debit and credit cards.
Yeah. But then when you get to Turkey, it's a very different story, because Turkey, Greece, Portugal, a lot of retailers do prefer cash. And then when you come to use the ATM machines there, big charges.
Absolutely. And so these are fees on top of fees. So some countries, instead of having those free ATMs, you will have to pay at a lot of them. A lot of countries will have those ATMs which are free. They will often be the big banks. HSBC in Turkey is said to often have free withdrawals. So it's worth looking before you go to a country which banks will offer it. Usually it's the biggest, shiniest bank in the centre of the city, right?
Yeah.
But then on top of that, you've got to consider that your card may well have a withdrawal fee for using an ATM, and you might be charged an extra percentage on top for the conversion. So there are plenty of fees.
OK, when you talk about the difference in cards then, is there a particular card that, I don't know, that is more advantageous when it comes to avoiding fees we should think about using while we're abroad?
Absolutely. There is a massive gulf between the very best, things like Halifax Clarity credit card, First Direct have a fantastic debit card, Monzo, that have no fees attached to spending and ATM withdrawals. And then there will be others that are charging £2 maybe to take money from an ATM, plus a percentage. Maybe you've got an extra charge when you're shopping shopping in store, fees on fees. So before you go and you're going to rely on a card, make sure you have your proper travel credit card.
Yeah, there's lots of research to do, isn't there? I always want to know the answer to this question, Harry. So often when you do use your card and you're abroad and you're tapping, for example, you do get asked, would you like to pay, for example, in euros or sterling? What one should you do?
Euros every time. The local currency, because then the conversion is done by your bank and you'll get a pretty good rate if you've got a good card, rather than the conversion being done by this third party who really has got a bit of an incentive to charge you quite a few pounds when the price is cheaper in euros. So always go for that local option.
All right, always good to know. Harry, thank you so much for coming to talk to us, and we're looking forward to the holidays. Thank you.
Travels.
Some other news now. While many in the UK are still heading off on holiday, pupils in Scotland are already back at school, and this term there's new guidance for head teachers about mobile phones in the classroom. The Scottish Government has stopped short of a nationwide ban, but schools will have the power to prohibit devices if they want. Our Scotland reporter Louise Scott has been at a school in Glasgow.
Well, this guidance introduced by the Scottish Government is hoping to tackle issues around mobile phones and behaviour within schools. They hope this will empower schools to take control and implement rules which may help in the classroom. A recent survey of Scottish secondary teachers found that 92% said their lessons were being interrupted by asking pupils to put their phones away, while 71% highlighted that the misuse of phones was having an impact on poor pupil behaviour. Well, I'm here at St Andrews Secondary School in Glasgow, which has just implemented a new rule where pupils will have to put their phones away at the start of each class. Well, I'm joined by the Deputy Head Teacher, Melissa. Melissa, why have you implemented this rule and what difference are you hoping it will make?
Well, we had a very clear policy on mobile phone use, and it was effective to a certain extent, but it still did require staff to be constantly saying to pupils, put your phone away. Now, it would only be one pupil would get one warning and it would go away, but then another pupil would then have their phone out, and that could happen a number of times in a lesson. So this new policy we've adopted will reduce that. It will make sure that no pupil has a mobile phone in class.
Thank you, Melissa. Now, Ayomide, you're in 6th year. How have you found phones have impacted in the classroom?
I think especially from my journey from 1st year to 6th year, especially in those BGE years, I find that lots of people were finding it difficult to focus and not learning these fundamentals that were really essential in our senior years. Our school, we don't have as much as an issue with bullying. However, there have been cases where people have felt unsafe online, and I think it's important, especially with not having mobile phones in the classroom, will reduce people's risk of being on the internet when they don't wish to be, as well when they're learning in class, and just make everyone feel a lot safer.
Thank you so much for that. It's obviously a hugely interesting subject, something that already has been rolled out in England, but it'll be interesting to see how it affects the Scottish schools and whether behaviour does improve, as there's been a real concern about that in recent years.
Louise Scott there in Glasgow. Now, a 29-year-old man who was shot by a Surrey police firearms officer and taken to hospital in a critical condition has died. The Independent Office for Police Conduct said the man died yesterday after he was shot in the village of Knaphill near Woking on Sunday. The IPCC said it will continue to investigate the shooting. Tech giant WhatsApp has been accused of doing nothing to stop the spread of indecent images of children on the app. The Internet Watch Foundation has called on Meta to put more mechanisms in place to stop the spread of child sexual abuse images. WhatsApp has defended itself, saying other messaging apps do not have the safety measures it has developed. 11 miles of the canal closed due to a cyanide spill have reopened after tests showed the water quality was now within safety guidelines. Previous tests had shown the presence of sodium cyanide and zinc cyanide. A half-mile stretch of the Warsaw Canal has remained closed, and anglers are still being warned not to eat fish from any parts of the affected canal. And some good news for retailers. The Euros helped push up July retail sales. Sales of football shirts, electronics and alcohol grew during England's journey to the final. Total sales rose by 0.5% in July, which was also helped by summer discounts. It is, says Ed Sheeran, any football fan's dream to own the club they support. Now the singer-songwriter has made his dream come true, taking a stake in his beloved Tractor Boys. The 33-year-old announced he now owns a 1.4% share in Ipswich Town, the Suffolk side, back in the Premier League this season, but he won't have a place on the club's board. And finally, it has been a busy 24 hours for Ed Sheeran, who last night made a surprise appearance at Wembley. He joined Taylor Swift for an onstage duet as her Eras tour returned to London, and it certainly was met with the approval of the sellout crowd of 90,000 fans. But as our entertainment reporter Rishi Davda reports, it wasn't the first time the pair have played the venue.
The joyful screams of Swifties at shows are always heard for miles. But when Taylor brought best friend Ed Sheeran to the stage last night, they reached an almost ear-piercing level. With guitars in hand, they delighted fans with a couple of their collaborations. Not the first time they've played Wembley Stadium together. Fresh-faced and not quite as famous, the pair performed back in 2013, a stepping stone on their journey to global stardom.
This is one of my best friends in the world, to the point where I feel like he's a second brother of mine.
As their individual careers flourished, they continued to work on music together from time to time. Taylor's International Eras tour, which began back in March 2023, has broken records from the start, grossing more than $1 billion. Nearly 5 million tickets have been sold. Her current run of 5 shows in London, finishing on Tuesday, marks the end of the European leg. And after surprising fans with Ed Sheeran on night 1, just how is she going to top that this evening? Rishi Davda, ITV News.
We'll have to wait and see. That's it for now. The evening news is at 6:30, but from everyone on the Lunchtime team, bye-bye.